Hello everyone, my name is Allison and today I'm going to share with you a story that changed the way my family sees me forever. Leave a comment where you're watching from, because this story will affect you as much as it affected me. Imagine the scene. I'm 30 years old, finally realizing my dream of being a police officer, when I get a desperate call from my mother, crying, saying that a man was threatening our family. And guess who was the first person she called asking for help? Exactly, that useless daughter who, according to her, would never make it in life. But for you to fully understand this turn of events, I need to go back a few years in time and tell you how it all began. My name is Allison Parker, I'm 30 years old and I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio. My father, Thomas Parker, was always a civil engineer, one of those serious men who believe that success is measured only by the paycheck at the end of the month. My mother, Sandra Parker, worked as an accountant in a small office and always had this habit of comparing her children to their neighbors. I have two brothers, Michael, who is 2 years older than me, and Daniel, 3 years younger. Michael has always been the darling of the family. From an early age, he showed an aptitude for math and science, and my parents planned for him to follow in Thomas's footsteps into engineering. Daniel, on the other hand, was the baby of the house, always protected and spoiled. And me? Well, I was always the black sheep. Ever since I was a child, I was different. While Michael played with Legos and Daniel with video games, I watched police shows on TV. CSI, Law and Order, NCIS, I devoured them all. I was fascinated by detectives solving cases, by justice being served, by brave people protecting others. I remember that when I was 12 years old, when the teacher asked us at school what we wanted to be when we grew up, I proudly raised my hand and said, "I want to be a police officer." The other kids laughed, but I was serious. When I got home and told my parents, the reaction was devastating. Thomas looked at me over his glasses and said in that condescending tone I hated, "Allison, being a cop is not a profession for a decent girl. It's too dangerous and doesn't pay well. You need to think about something more realistic." Sandra nodded in agreement. "Daughter, you need to stop fantasizing. Why don't you think about being a teacher or a nurse? Those are professions more suited to women." But I didn't give up. Throughout my adolescence, while Michael excelled in math competitions and Daniel was praised for everything he did, I continued to dream of being a cop. I practiced martial arts in secret, read books on criminology, and followed police news. The trigger came when I was 18, at my high school graduation dinner. The whole family was gathered together, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, and my mother was all proud, talking about her children's plans. Sandra began. Michael was accepted into the state university to study engineering, like father like son. And Daniel is doing very well in school, he'll probably pursue something in the business field. Then my Aunt Margaret asked, "What about Allison? What are her plans?" That's when I took a deep breath and said, "I'm going to enlist in the police academy. I want to be a police officer." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel all eyes on me. Thomas turned red with rage and slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. Thomas exploded, "Enough, Allison. You've crossed the line. I'm not going to let one of my daughters become a police officer. It's a profession for people without an education, for people who haven't achieved anything better in life." I tried to argue, "Dad, being a police officer is an honorable profession. It's about protecting people, doing justice." But he cut me off. "Do justice? You can't even tidy your own room properly. How are you going to protect anyone? You're weak, Allison. You've always been the weakest of the three. Michael has brains, Daniel has charm, and you? You only have these ridiculous fantasies." His words hit me like punches. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry in front of everyone. Sandra tried to soften it, but it only got worse. "Thomas, don't be so harsh. Allison, dear, you're still young, you'll change your mind. How about taking a business course? It's safer." My paternal grandmother, Dorothy, who was always a little different from the rest of the family, broke the silence. "In my day, a girl who wanted to be a police officer would be admitted to a mental hospital. Fortunately, nowadays girls can dream bigger, like being a secretary or a receptionist. That was the last straw. I got up from the table and said, "You'll see. One day you're going to need me, and then you're going to realize you were wrong." Thomas laughed disdainfully. "Need you? For what, Allison? To protect us? You can barely protect yourself from your own shadow." I ran to my room and cried all night. But it was also that night that I made a decision. I was going to prove them all wrong, no matter what the cost. The next morning, I woke up determined. Without telling anyone, I went to the city police academy and applied for the selection process. I had saved enough money from a few part-time jobs during high school to pay the initial fees. When my parents found out, 2 weeks later, all hell broke loose. Thomas called me into the living room for a talk. "Allison, I found out what you did. This is ridiculous and it's going to stop right now." I looked at him with all the determination I could muster. "Dad, I'm 18. I can make my own decisions." He crossed his arms. "Very well. If you want to play the rebel, then you're going to do it alone. Until you give up this madness, don't count on our financial support for anything. Not for a car, not for an apartment, not for emergencies." Sandra tried to intervene. "Thomas, don't be so radical." But he continued, "No, Sandra. Does she want to be independent? Then let her be truly independent. Michael and Daniel will have our support in college because they chose decent careers. She chose this path, and now she has to face the consequences." Those words hurt, but they also made me stronger. If they thought I couldn't do it alone, I was going to prove them wrong. The academy's selection process was one of the most difficult periods of my life. There were intense physical tests, complex written exams, and rigorous psychological evaluations. Many of the candidates had previous training, some even came from military families. I was starting from scratch. I remember one specific day, during the running test. It was a 5-kilometer endurance race, and I was struggling to keep up. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like lead, and I could hear some candidates laughing, saying, "Look at the little princess back there, she won't last another kilometer." That's when I remembered my father's words, "You're weak, Allison. You've always been the weakest of the three." And something inside me caught fire. I picked up my pace, passed several candidates, and finished the race in the top 10. The instructor, Sergeant Williams, a black man in his 40s with an imposing presence, called me over after the test. "Parker, what happened there? At first you were almost giving up, and by the end it seemed like you had found some extra fuel." I answered breathlessly, "Sergeant, sometimes we need to remember why we're fighting." He nodded with a half smile. "Good answer. But remember, in this profession, you're going to need that fuel every day, not just when someone doubts you." I passed the selection process, but that was just the beginning. The police academy was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. It was 6 months of intensive training, physical conditioning, combat techniques, first aid, criminal law, criminal psychology, marksmanship, and more. I was one of the few women in the class, and some instructors and fellow officers made it clear that they didn't think I should be there. But I also found important allies. One of them was Rebecca Chen, a self-defense instructor who had been a police officer for 15 years before becoming a trainer. She pulled me aside for a chat after a particularly tough class where I had gotten beat up pretty badly during combat exercises. Rebecca said, "Allison, can I ask you a personal question? Why do you want to be a police officer?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Instructor, I've always wanted to protect people. And also, I have something to prove to my family." Rebecca shook her head. "Be careful with that second part. If you're doing this just to prove something to others, you could end up hurting yourself or someone else. But if you really want to protect people, then you have potential. You just need more training." From that day on, Rebecca started giving me extra training. We would stay after regular hours practicing immobilization, disarming, and emergency situations. She taught me that physical strength was important, but strategic intelligence was essential. Rebecca always said, "On the street, you won't beat everyone with your fists. But if you know how to use your brain, you can control any situation. During this period, my relationship with my family deteriorated even further. The few times I went home, the conversations were tense. During a Sunday dinner, Michael said, "Allison, it's not too late to change your mind. I can help you apply to college. There are some business courses that are really easy." Daniel, who was at the university studying marketing, added, "That's true. You're still young, you can make up for lost time." Sandra sighed, "Daughter, we only worry about you. Being a police officer is very dangerous. What if something happens? Thomas wouldn't even look at me properly. If she wants to play cop, let her. She'll soon get tired and go back to reality." These conversations made me angry, but also more determined. Each disparaging comment was fuel for me to train harder, study harder, dedicate myself more. One of the most memorable moments at the academy was during a practical negotiation exercise. We had to resolve a simulated situation where a man was threatening to jump off a building. Many of my colleagues tried to use authority, shout, give orders. When it was my turn, I approached slowly and started talking. I said to the actor playing the man in crisis, "I know you must be going through something very difficult to get here. Do you want to tell me what's going on?" For 15 minutes, I talked to him about his problems, validated his feelings, and showed him alternatives. In the end, he gave up on jumping and accepted help. The instructor in charge of the exercise, Captain Rodriguez, called me over later. "Parker, where did you learn negotiation techniques?" I replied, "Captain, I didn't learn them anywhere. I just tried to put myself in his shoes and think about what I would want to hear if I were desperate." Captain Rodriguez nodded in amazement. "It's called empathy, Parker. It's one of the most important qualities in a police officer, and it can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. You have it." The day of the academy's graduation was both emotional and sad at the same time. I was there, finally realizing my dream, but I looked out at the audience and saw that my family was not there. Some of my classmates had entire families celebrating, proud fathers, mothers crying with emotion, siblings taking pictures. I was alone. Rebecca Chen, who was at the ceremony as the instructor's representative, came up to me afterwards. "Allison, I'm proud of you. I know it was hard to get here without the support of your family." I tried not to show my sadness. "Thank you, instructor. They'll understand one day." Rebecca put her hand on my shoulder. "Maybe, maybe not. But the important thing is that you know who you are and what you're worth. No one can take that away from you." That night, I called home to tell them about the graduation. Sandra answered the phone. I said excitedly, "Mom, I graduated today. Now I'm officially a police officer." Sandra answered in a tired voice, "Oh, that's great, daughter. Congratulations." I asked, "Don't you want to know how the ceremony went?" Sandra sighed, "Allison, your father is stressed with work, and Daniel has a test tomorrow. Can you tell me later?" I hung up the phone with a heavy heart. But also with a renewed resolve. If they couldn't be proud of me, I would be proud of myself. My first years as a police officer were full of learning. I started working at a police station in the city center, doing basic patrol and responding to minor incidents. My initial partner was Officer James Morrison, a 20-year veteran who at first wasn't very excited about working with a rookie. James made it clear from day one, "Parker, I don't have time to fawn over rookies. You stay quiet, observe, and only speak when I ask you something." But little by little, as I demonstrated competence and dedication, our partnership improved. James began to teach me the nuances of police work that they don't teach in the academy: how to read body language, how to spot lies, how to de-escalate conflicts. One of the first notable incidents was a domestic violence case. We were called to a house where a woman was being assaulted by her husband. When we arrived, the man was visibly drunk and the woman had bruises on her face. James tried to talk to the aggressor, but the man became more aggressive. "Get out of my house. This is none of your business." That's when I approached the woman, who was trembling in a corner of the room. "What's your name?" She answered softly, "Patricia." I continued in a calm voice, "Patricia, you're hurt. You need medical attention. Can I call an ambulance? Patricia started to cry. He said he'll kill me if I say anything. I knelt down to her level. Patricia, my name is Allison. I'm a police officer, and my job is to protect you. He won't hurt you again, I promise. It took another 20 minutes of conversation, but I managed to convince Patricia to accept medical help and press charges against her husband. James was impressed. On the way back, James commented, "Parker, you have a knack for dealing with victims. Most police officers, especially men, fail to make that connection." I replied, "James, I think it's because I understand what it's like to feel small and helpless." Cases like this became my specialty. Over time, I began to be called upon specifically for incidents involving women and children who were victims of violence. I developed approach techniques, studied trauma psychology on my own, and took additional courses. My captain at the time, Captain Foster, called me in for a talk after 2 years on the job. "Parker, I've been watching your performance. You have a natural talent for sensitive cases. How about we consider transferring you to the Crimes Against Persons Division?" It was exactly the opportunity one was waiting for. The Crimes Against Persons Division was more challenging, but also more meaningful. There I could really make a difference in people's lives. During those years, my professional life flourished, but my family life remained icy. The few times I visited my parents, the conversations were superficial and tense. Thomas would always make indirect comments. "Allison, aren't you afraid of carrying a gun around? What if some criminal disarms you?" Sandra would always change the subject. "How about we talk about other things? Michael is dating a really nice girl." Daniel, who was already graduating in marketing, would sometimes try to break the ice. "Allie, have you ever caught any famous thieves?" But even Daniel's attempt seemed more like morbid curiosity than genuine interest. What hurt me the most was that they never asked me about my real work. They never wanted to know about the cases I solved, the people I helped, or how my career was growing. On the other hand, I had found a new family at work. My fellow officers became real brothers. Rebecca Chen, even after I graduated, continued to be a mentor. James Morrison became a foster father. And when I transferred to Crimes Against Persons, I found a team that truly valued my work. My new supervisor, Detective Lisa Thompson, was a 40-year-old black woman with 18 years of experience in investigations. She was the one who taught me that being a cop wasn't just about catching bad guys, but about restoring dignity to victims. Lisa told me on my first day in the new division, "Allison, you're going to see things that will scar you forever. You're going to hear stories that will make you question humanity. But you're also going to have the chance to restore hope to people who had already lost everything. It's a huge responsibility." It was working in the Crimes Against Persons Division that I really began to stand out. My specialty was stalking and threats. I had developed a knack for spotting patterns of obsessive behavior and anticipating escalations of violence. One of the most complex cases I took on was that of Marcus Reed, a 35-year-old man who was stalking several women in the area simultaneously. He had a specific modus operandi. He would choose women who lived alone, study their routines for weeks, and then begin a campaign of psychological intimidation. Marcus would send anonymous letters, make silent phone calls, leave gifts on his victims' doorsteps, and even break into their homes to move objects around without stealing anything. The goal was to create psychological terror. When I got the case, Marcus had already tormented at least 8 women, but we had never gathered enough evidence to arrest him. He was very intelligent, always wore gloves, varied his techniques, and never followed a fixed time pattern. I spent months studying his behavior. I talked to all his victims, analyzed their letters, mapped out the crime scenes, and studied the psychology of obsessive stalkers. Slowly, I began to notice a pattern that no one had noticed before. Marcus chose women who physically resembled his ex-wife, brown hair, average height, and ages between 25 and 35. Most importantly, they all lived in neighborhoods within a 10-kilometer radius of the house where he had lived with his ex-wife. With this information, I was able to predict who his next potential victims would be. I set up a covert surveillance operation at 3 addresses that fit the profile. After 2 weeks, we finally caught Marcus red-handed trying to break into one of the women's homes. The arrest went smoothly, but the interrogation was intense. Marcus was manipulative, clever, and tried to play mind games with me. Marcus said during the interrogation, "You don't understand what those women did to me. They remind me of her, of the woman who destroyed my life." I replied calmly, "Marcus, those women didn't do anything to you. They don't even know you." Marcus leaned forward, "Oh, but you do, don't you? You're a woman too. You know how cruel you can be, how you can destroy a man." That's when I used a technique Rebecca Chen had taught me years before, turning the psychological tables on him. I said, "Marcus, you're right. I understand your pain. But you know what else I understand? That you're not strong enough to deal with this pain like a real man. Instead of moving on from what happened, you decided to terrorize innocent women. That's not strength, Marcus. That's cowardice." He was shaken, tried to keep his composure, but I kept going. A real man would have moved on. He would have built a new life. But you? You're stuck in the past, haunting women who have nothing to do with your problems. It's pathetic. Marcus exploded and confessed everything. Not only the crimes we already knew about, but 3 other cases we hadn't even discovered yet. Detective Lisa Thompson congratulated me afterwards. "Allison, that was one of the best interrogation techniques I've ever seen. How did you know exactly what to say?" I replied, "Lisa, I grew up being told I was weak and useless. I learned that sometimes the best way to disarm someone is to show their weakness, not your strength." The Marcus Reed case brought me recognition within the department. I received a commendation for investigative excellence, and I began to be invited to give lectures on investigative techniques in stalking cases. It was a Tuesday in March, and I was in the office analyzing a new case when my phone rang. It was a number I recognized immediately, my parents' house. But it was 2 p.m., the time my mother was usually at work. I answered it worriedly, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was shaky, desperate. "Allison? Allison, is that you?" It was my mother, and she was clearly panicked. I got up from my chair. "Mom, what happened? Are you okay?" Sandra was crying. "Allison, there's a man here in the house. He came in through the back door, and he's saying he's going to hurt me if I don't give him the money he wants." My blood ran cold. "Mom, where are you now?" Sandra whispered, "I'm locked in the bathroom on the 2nd floor. But he knows I'm here. He's banging on the door and yelling." I could hear muffled knocks and screams on the other end of the line. I said, trying to stay calm, "Mom, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. Have you called 911 yet?" Sandra sobbed, "I couldn't. He cut off my landline and my cell phone. I was only able to call you because I remembered your number." "Allison, I'm so scared." I was already running to my car. "Mom, I'm on my way. Don't hang up the phone. Stay with me on the line and tell me everything that's happening." Sandra continued, "He said he knows our family, that he knows where we work, where we live." "Allison, what if he hurts your father when he gets home from work?" I got in the car and turned on the siren. "Mom, how long has he been there?" Sandra thought, "About 15 minutes, maybe 20. I was eating lunch when I heard noise in the kitchen. While driving at high speed, I called the dispatcher on the radio and asked for backup at my parents' house. I also alerted Lisa Thompson to the situation. Lisa radioed back, "Allison, you have a personal stake. It's best to let another team take over." I said, "Lisa, he's threatening my mother right now. There's no time to wait for another team to get here. I'm 5 minutes away from the house." Sandra was still on the phone. "Allison, he stopped knocking on the door. I can hear him rummaging around downstairs. Oh my God, what if he's looking for a way to get upstairs?" I said, "Mom, is there anything in the bathroom that you can use to defend yourself if he gets in?" Sandra looked around. There's some hairspray and some small scissors." I replied, "Grab the scissors and stand near the door. If he tries to come in, you scream as loud as you can and use the scissors if necessary. Do you understand?" Sandra was sobbing. "Allison, I'm so scared. If I die, I want you to know that I've always worried about you, even when I didn't show it." I interrupted. "Mom, you're not going to die. I'm coming. Less than 2 minutes to go." When I got to my parents' street, I turned off the siren so as not to alert the intruder. I parked 2 houses ahead and approached on foot, gun in hand. My parents' house was a typical middle-class building, 2 stories, a front yard, a main entrance and a back door that led to the kitchen. I managed to approach silently from the side of the house. Through the living room window, I could see a thin man, about 40 years old, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. He seemed nervous, agitated, probably under the influence of drugs. I whispered into the radio, "Suspect located on the 1st floor. Female hostage on the 2nd floor. Request urgent backup." The dispatcher responded, "Backup en route, ETA 3 minutes. But 3 minutes could have been an eternity. The man was getting more agitated, and I could hear him yelling, "Where's the money? I know you have money hidden." My mother was still on the phone with me, whispering, "Allison, he's yelling again. I think he's coming up the stairs." I couldn't wait for backup. I went in through the back door, which was wide open, and positioned myself at the bottom of the stairs. The man was halfway up the stairs, heading toward the 2nd floor. When he saw me, he got scared and tried to run. I yelled, "Stop! Police! Hands up!" He hesitated for a moment, and that's when I realized he was armed. He had a knife in his right hand. The man yelled back, "Get out! It's not your problem." I kept the gun pointed at him. "I'm a police officer, and you're breaking into my mother's house. This is my problem." Drop the knife and walk down the stairs slowly. That's when he recognized me. His eyes widened. Are you Allison Parker?" I was confused. "Do you know me?" He started laughing in a disturbed way. "Of course I do. You're the police officer's daughter that the whole family is ashamed of. Your mother is always complaining about you at her job." His words hit me like a punch, but I kept my focus. "How do you know my mother?" He continued, "I work as a cleaner in the building where she's an accountant. I always hear her telling her coworkers what a disappointment you are, how you chose a ridiculous profession." Even with the pain of his words, I kept my aim. "It doesn't matter what you heard. Drop the knife and turn yourself in." But he was clearly impaired by drugs and became more aggressive. "Your own mother doesn't believe you. How are you going to arrest me?" That's when he made the mistake of trying to run down the stairs toward me with the knife in his hand. I used exactly the techniques Rebecca Chen had taught me years before. I waited for him to get close, dodged the attack, and used his own strength against himself. With one quick move, I managed to disarm him of the knife and pin him to the ground. The man tried to resist. "Let go. You're not a real cop. Your family said so." As I put on the handcuffs, I replied, "My family may not believe me, but these handcuffs are very real." At that moment, I heard the bathroom door open on the 2nd floor, and my mother's voice shouting, "Allison? Allison, are you okay?" I shouted back, "I'm fine, Mom. Come down, he's under arrest." Backup arrived just as I was finishing handcuffing the intruder. 2 officers came through the front door, and one of them was James Morrison, my old partner. James looked at the scene and shook his head with a smile. "Parker, you can't even take a day off without arresting someone, can you?" I replied, still out of breath, "James, this is David Martinez. He has several convictions for robbery and breaking and entering. He was threatening my mother." At that moment, Sandra ran down the stairs and did something she had never done in my adult life. She hugged me tightly and started to cry. Sandra sobbed, "Allison, my daughter, you saved my life." I was so scared. I held her in my arms. "It's okay now, Mom. He won't bother you anymore." David Martinez was taken away by the backup team, but not before screaming as he was put in the police car, "Your whole family knows you're a failure. I heard your mother telling everyone." I looked at Sandra, who turned red with shame and lowered her head. After all the police officers had left and we had finished giving our statements, We were left alone in the living room. The silence was heavy, full of things left unsaid. Sandra finally broke the silence. "Allison, I need to apologize to you." I sat down next to her on the couch. "Mom, you don't have to." She interrupted me. "No, I do. What that man said was true. I did talk about you at work, and not in good ways." The words hurt, but I had already suspected. "Why, Mom?" Sandra started to cry. "Because I was afraid, Allison. Afraid that you would get hurt, afraid that you would choose a dangerous life. And when people asked about you, I didn't know what to say. How could I explain that my daughter had chosen a profession that terrified me?" I took a deep breath. "So it was easier to talk bad about me?" Sandra shook her head. "It wasn't talking bad, it was trying to convince myself that you would change your mind. If I had said it was a phase, that you were going to give up, maybe that would have come true." We were silent for a few minutes. Then Sandra continued, "But today, when that man was here, and I was locked in the bathroom, afraid of dying, the first person I thought to call was you. It wasn't your father, it wasn't your brothers. It was you. Because deep down I always knew you were the strongest of all of us." I felt tears burning my eyes. "Mom, I just wanted you to be proud of me." Sandra took my hands. "Allison, I was always proud of you. I was afraid, but I was always proud. You were the only one of the three of you who had the courage to pursue your dream, even when everyone was against it." I asked, "What about Dad? Will he still think I'm a failure?" Sandra sighed. "Your father is stubborn, but he's not stupid. Today you saved his wife's life. That will change his perspective on everything." As if she had summoned him, we heard the key turning in the lock. Thomas was coming home from work. Sandra and I exchanged nervous glances. Thomas walked through the front door and immediately noticed something was different. "Sandra? Why are you home at this hour? And why is there yellow police tape on the back door?" Sandra got up and walked over to him. "Thomas, sit down here. I need to tell you something." She told him everything. The break-in, the fear, how you called me, how I arrived and arrested the man. Thomas looked at me throughout the story with an expression I had never seen before. When Sandra finished telling her story, Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then he got up and came over to where I was sitting. Thomas said in a choked voice, "Allison, I don't know what to say." I replied, "You don't have to say anything, Dad." But he continued, "No, I do. I spent years thinking you were wasting your life, that you were making bad choices. But today you saved my wife's life. You saved our family." Thomas sat down in front of me. "Daughter, I was wrong. Completely wrong. You are not weak, you never were. You are the bravest of all of us." I felt an emotion I had not experienced in years, the feeling of being accepted by my own family. Thomas continued, "Allison, I am proud of you. I should have told you this a long time ago, but I am proud of the woman you have become, the professional you are, the brave person you have always been." I could not hold back the tears. "Dad, you have no idea how long I have waited to hear this." Thomas was also moved, "And you have no idea how much time I wasted being too proud to admit I was wrong." That night, Sandra called Michael and Daniel to tell them what had happened. An hour later, they were both at our parents' house. Michael arrived first, clearly shaken. "Allison, Mom told me everything on the phone." "My God, what if you hadn't arrived in time?" Daniel arrived soon after. "Allie, you are a hero. I can't believe she arrested the guy all by herself." But what struck me the most was when Michael, who had always been the perfect son, said, "Allison, I owe you an apology. I always thought you were being rebellious, that you were choosing to be a cop just to go against Mom and Dad." Daniel agreed, "That's true. We always thought you would get tired and change careers." Michael continued, "But today I understood that you weren't being rebellious. You were being yourself. And we were too blind to see it." Sandra served coffee for everyone, and for the first time in years, our family had a real conversation, without judgment, without criticism, without comparisons. Thomas said, "Allison, I want to know about your work. For real this time. Tell me about the cases you solve, about the people you help. For 2 hours, I told them about my career, about the Marcus Reed case, about the victims I had helped, about the criminals I had arrested, about the courses and training I constantly took. Michael was impressed. Allison, you're basically a specialized detective. That's incredible. Daniel added, and how much do you earn? I bet it's more than we imagined. Sandra laughed. Daniel, don't ask that. But I replied, actually, I earn well. Especially with overtime and special cases. I probably earn as much as Michael earns as an engineer. Thomas was surprised. Really? I always thought that police officers didn't earn much. I explained, Dad, a rookie police officer doesn't earn much. But with specialization, experience and dedication, the career can be very lucrative. In addition to the financial salary, there's the emotional salary of knowing that I'm making a difference in people's lives. The following week, the story of my arrest of David Martinez spread throughout the department. Not only because I had arrested a criminal wanted for several crimes, but because it had been a personal case where I maintained my professionalism. Captain Foster called me in for a chat. Allison, I need to congratulate you not only for the arrest, but for the way you handled the situation. Many police officers lose control when the situation is personal. I replied, Captain, I have learned that when you have adequate training and psychological preparation, you can stay focused even in emotional situations. Captain Foster nodded, exactly. And that is why we want to promote you. We have an opening for Detective Sergeant in the Special Crimes Division. Are you interested? It was the promotion I had been waiting for years. Very interested, Captain. Captain Foster smiled, great. The promotion will be official next month. Congratulations, Sergeant Parker. When I left the captain's office, I immediately called home. Sandra answered. I said excitedly, Mom, I have been promoted. I am now a detective sergeant. Sandra shouted with joy, Allison. That's wonderful. I need to call your father and tell him. For the first time in her life, my mother was excited about a professional achievement of mine. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for a month later. It was a formal event where several police officers would receive promotions, commendations, and recognition. A week before the ceremony, Thomas called me, Allison, what time is your ceremony again? I replied, it's 10 a.m. on Saturday, Dad. Why? Thomas said, because I want to be there. We all want to be there. I felt so emotional. Do you want to come to the ceremony? Thomas replied in an emotional voice, Daughter, I missed your graduation from the academy because I was being a proud idiot. I'm not going to miss your promotion. On the day of the ceremony, when I looked out into the audience, I saw my entire family in the front row, Thomas, Sandra, Michael, Daniel, and even my grandmother Dorothy, who rarely left the house. When my name was called and I walked up on stage to receive my detective sergeant's insignia, I heard enthusiastic applause from my family. Thomas was standing, clapping his hands with a proud smile on his face. After the ceremony, everyone came up to congratulate me. Dorothy, who years before had made disparaging comments about my choice, said, Allison, honey, you look beautiful in that uniform. Your grandmother is so proud. Sandra kept taking pictures. Daughter, I have to show these pictures to everyone at work. I asked jokingly, now you're not ashamed to talk about me at work? Sandra laughed, now I'm going to brag. My daughter is a detective sergeant. You'll hear about Allison all day long. After the promotion, my relationship with my family changed completely. Sunday lunches, which had previously been battlegrounds, became moments of real connection. Thomas would always ask about my cases. Allison, can you tell me about that stalker case you solved? Michael discovered that we had more in common than we thought. Allie, engineering and criminal investigation have a lot in common. Both require methodical analysis and complex problem solving. Daniel began to see me as a source of interesting stories. Sister, you have to tell my friends about that car chase. But the most significant change was in Sandra. She began to take a genuine interest in my work and even began to study public safety issues. Sandra said over dinner, "Allison, I was reading about domestic violence statistics, and the work you do is amazing. How many families have you helped?" I replied, "Mom, it's hard to count. But I know that each case makes a difference in someone's life." Sandra smiled, and I wonder, if you hadn't become a police officer, how many of these people wouldn't have received help? With the support of my family finally gained, my confidence in my work grew even more. As a detective sergeant, I began leading complex investigations and training younger officers. One of the most notable cases after my promotion was a human trafficking ring that operated in the region. It was a case that required months of investigation, coordination with other police departments, and advanced undercover techniques. During the operation, which resulted in the arrest of 15 people and the rescue of 23 victims, I received praise from colleagues, superiors, and even federal agents who participated in the operation. Special Agent Kevin Turner of the FBI commented, "Sergeant Parker, your analysis of behavioral patterns was essential to the success of this operation. Have you ever considered working at the federal level?" The offer was tempting, but I had found my place. I knew I could make a bigger difference working in the community where I grew up, protecting people like my family. Today, at 30, when I look back on the journey I have traveled, I am amazed at how much has changed. The 18-year-old girl who left home determined to prove herself has become a woman who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. I have learned that sometimes the people we love the most are also the ones who hurt us the most, not out of malice, but out of fear. My parents didn't criticize me because they didn't love me, but because they were afraid of losing me to a profession they considered dangerous. Thomas recently told me, "Allison, I was always afraid that you would get hurt. I couldn't understand that you were strong enough to protect yourself and others." Sandra added, "And I was afraid that you would choose a hard life. I didn't realize that an easy life would not be a true life for you." Today, our family is completely different. Michael married an engineer named Rachel, and they have a 2-year-old daughter, Sophie. Daniel is engaged to a teacher named Anna. And me? Still single, but happy with my career and the relationships I've built. The most interesting thing is that now I'm seen as the successful daughter of the family. Not because I earn more money or have more prestige, but because I found my true calling and had the courage to pursue it even when everyone was against it. Sophie, my niece, always wants to play police officer when she visits me. She puts a cap on her head and pretends to arrest me. "Aunt Allie, you're under arrest for being too nice." Michael always jokes, "Be careful, Sophie. Your real aunt arrests people." And Thomas, who used to be ashamed of my profession, now brags to all the neighbors, "My daughter is a detective sergeant. She's already arrested over 100 criminals." Guys, as I come to the end of this story, I want to leave you with some thoughts I've learned during this journey. First, never give up on your dreams because other people, even those you love, can't understand. Sometimes the people who love you the most are also the ones who are most afraid of your dreams. Second, prove yourself through actions, not words. I could have spent years trying to convince my family that being a police officer was a good choice, but it was only through my work, my dedication, and ironically, saving my own mother, that I was able to change their perspective. Third, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean releasing the weight of the hurt. My parents hurt me deeply for years, but holding on to anger wouldn't change the past, it would only poison my future. Fourth, sometimes people need to see you shine to recognize your light. My family couldn't see my potential when I was just an 18-year-old dreamer. But when they saw me as a competent professional saving the life of one of our own, everything changed. And finally, your true calling will shine through in the most challenging moments. When I got that panicked phone call from my mother, I didn't think about revenge, I didn't think about, "Now you'll see," I just thought about protecting someone I loved. That's the heart of being a police officer, protecting and serving, regardless of personal circumstances. Today, when I go to work every day, I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm not a police officer because I couldn't be anything else, as David Martinez tried to diminish me. I'm a police officer because that's my true calling, my way of making a difference in the world. What about you, who are watching this video? What are the dreams that you're not following because someone said they wouldn't work? What important person in your life needs to see you shine to finally recognize your worth? Leave your own stories of overcoming, of dreams that seemed impossible but came true in the comments. I want to read about your journeys. And if this story inspired you in any way, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to follow your own path. Thank you for watching until the end, and remember, you are stronger than you think, more capable than you believe, and more important than anyone who tries to diminish your dreams. See you in the next video.